Welcome to the Enchanted Earth podcast, where you will hear stories of nature with the power to transform our lives. These sacred stories are begging to be shared now. So listen in as my guest today shares one of their own. Well, hello and welcome today. I have John Perkins, and let me tell you a little bit about John. John Perkins focuses on transformation, personal and communal and global. A leading authority on shamanism, he learned the power of using perceived reality to change objective reality from shamans in the Amazon who saved his life, and then with other shamans on 5 continents. He has used shamanic practices to help individuals, corporations, universities, and governments. His 11 books, including the 2 latest, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, China's Economic Hitman Strategy and Ways to Stop the Global Takeover, and Touching the Jaguar, have sold more than 2 million copies. In addition to his groundbreaking books on global intrigue, he has authored 5 books on indigenous cultures and transformation, including Shapeshifting. He is a founder of Dream Change, and along with Bill and Lynn Twist, the Pachamama Alliance, both nonprofits dedicating to creating a regenerative, peaceful, and thriving world. He was awarded the Lenin Ono Grant for Peace in 2012, along with Lady Gaga and Pussy Riot. You can learn more at johnperkins.org. So, welcome, John. Thank you so much for taking your time today to speak with me.
It's great to be with you, Maureen. My pleasure.
Well, so we talked about 2 years ago on our kind of peak experiences in nature. I like to say profound and often very sacred experiences. So, one thing that I realized when I was interviewing people for this book was a lot of my participants had a very interesting kind of nature connection as a child. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood in nature?
Well, I grew up in New Hampshire, and my dad was a school teacher, so I spent a lot of time in the forest. And in the summers, he had a lot of time off as a teacher, about 2 or 3 months. We had a cottage that my grandfather built 100 years ago this year, actually. And it was deep in the forest. We had no neighbors. It was on a lake, and I spent a tremendous amount of time in the forest as well as on the lake, communing with animals, trees. The trees were my friends, the animals were my friends. And yeah, I spent a great deal of time in those forests in those days. We had some cougars or mountain lions, or depending on what part of the world you're in, or what they call bobcats, bears, in addition to, all the more normal things like squirrels and chipmunks and these were all my friends. And skunks, I got to be very friendly with skunks. I learned you could get very, very close to a skunk as long as you were very careful not to scare it or upset it or make it fearful. Same with porcupines. They weren't quite as fun, though. The porcupines were a little slower and a little stranger, but the skunks they could be a lot of fun as long as you were really careful. And, yeah, I just grew up very close to nature. So it was a great childhood, actually.
Well, that does sound like an ideal childhood in nature. Wow, so beautiful. So this cabin actually, that's almost 100 years old. I think you go back there quite often, correct?
Yeah, I still own it. Or actually, this year I turned it over to my only child, my daughter, so it's now hers. I just thought, let her pay the taxes and the insurance. But yeah, it's a wonderful place. And my family, incidentally, both sides of my family, my mother's and my father's, go back to the Revolutionary War in New England or before 1600s. There's a side of the family that we know that a great, 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 great something grandmother was captured by the Abenaki, Algonquin speaking Indians. back in the 1700s and became one. Basically, she was captured and taken up to Canada, where she became integrated with the tribe. So I was always fascinated by these stories of Indigenous people, and I had a tremendous respect for their ability to live off the land and to live with the land, to live as part of nature, not apart from nature.
Mm.
And I joined the Peace Corps after graduating from business school. And I really joined the Peace Corps because I didn't believe in the Vietnam War. And I was determined not to go off and kill people or be killed by people who I had nothing against at all. And the Peace Corps was a possible alternative. And I asked for the Amazon and was sent there. And the reason I asked for the Amazon is because I knew it was one of the few places in the world where people still lived much as the Abenaki and Native North American people who I had such respect for.
Wow. Yeah. So there was an experience that you had down there in the Peace Corps that I think kind of led you into learning about shamanism.
Yes, as you mentioned earlier, a shaman saved my life. Really, I was dying at one point. I was deep, deep, deep in the Amazon, living with the Shuar people. Who, if you've ever seen a shrunken head or a picture of one, they did it. There are other headhunters in the world, but the Shuar are the only ones that actually shrink the heads. And back in the late '60s, when I was there was still a lot of that going on. There was warfare going on, and I'm there. This is very, very deep. And at one point, I got extremely sick. I couldn't keep any food down. And it was a 3-day walk at best from the nearest medical facility. I couldn't even stand up. I was pretty much relegated to lying in my sleeping bag on the floor on the dirt floor of a lodge. One night, a shaman approached me, came through a teacher who spoke Spanish, and this shaman said that he could heal me, and he did. And really, how he healed me was he took me on this shamanic journey, which involved the use of the plant ayahuasca, which I had never heard of. I don't think anybody in the United States had ever heard of it back in 1969. But I drunk this bitter liquid, and now I'm going through this very strange experience. And at one point, I've got my eyes closed, and the shaman, through the translator, says, "Touch the jaguar." Well, I'm in the middle of the jungle in the middle of the night, and I wake and I open my eyes. And I look around like I know there's jaguars out there. I've heard them. I've seen their tracks. Like, is there one coming? Am I going to touch a jaguar? And the shaman says, "No, no, no. Close your eyes. Visualize a jaguar and touch it." And so I did. And when I touched that jaguar, I heard a voice like my mother saying, "The food and drink will kill you." And, I have to explain that the people in the Amazon don't drink river water because they know it's got organic matter, fallen trees, dead animals. It's not safe to drink. So the women make a kind of beer called chicha by chewing manioc root and spitting it. It sets up a fermentation process and you get an alcohol. Then you can add water to it. They know this. So I'm drinking a lot of chicha because you got to rehydrate, and there wasn't any Perrier. And they eat some very strange foods, live grubs that anyway. And I'm eating a lot of very strange foods because, well, there weren't any Cliff Bars. And on this journey, on the shamanic journey, I hear my mother saying, "It'll kill you." And I realize that every time I'm eating these foods or drinking spit beer, I'm hearing this voice. And at the same time, I see in this shamanic journey that the Shuar themselves are very robust. Men are built like Tarzan, and people live to be very old. And so on this journey, I saw that it wasn't the food and drink that was killing me, it was my perception, it was my mindset. And after that, a few days later, I'm getting my health back very quickly. The shaman tells me that in payment, he requires that I become his apprentice. Now, 1969, I graduated from business school, never even heard the word shaman in my life. There was no future in shamanism in those days. I had no desire, but the guy saved my life. So I did for the next few couple of years. And one of the first things he taught me was when there's something blocking you, whatever's blocking you in your life, If you run from it, it'll chase you. If you touch it, if you go to it, if you confront it, it'll give you the energy to change your perceptions. And when you change your perception, you change your actions, and that changes reality. And this guy, what we would call primitive hunter gatherer type, no education whatsoever, totally illiterate, no education of our type. Let me say that. He had a great education, but not our type. He had this great concept. He said, perception molds reality. And of course, that's the basis for modern physics, quantum physics, or for modern psychotherapy. It's the basis for marketing. It's the basis for business. It's the basis for politics. And once enough people accept a perception or codify it into law, it results in actions that then mold reality. It was an amazing teaching, and it stuck with me, and I still practice it a lot. That's what I write about to a large degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of that story. There's a lot of stories, but that was the one you asked about.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. So many people who have been drawn to shamanism are called through a life or death situation. So not long ago, I think you visited your cabin and you shared a story of an encounter with some wildlife.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the bear encounter.
Yes.
As a kid, I spent a lot of time in the forest. Like I said, my parents gave me a great deal of freedom. I wandered throughout these vast forests, and there were a lot of animals. And I was always taught, like black bears in those forests, I was taught they're not particularly dangerous. Just don't molest them, leave them alone, and don't ever get between a mother bear and her cubs. Just don't ever do that. And I'm like, well, duh. Who'd do that? That'd be the stupidest thing I can't conceive of. It. Why do you even tell me that? Of course I wouldn't do that. Why would I? And now, a couple of years ago, at my age, I jog, and I'm jogging up this little path that goes up through these forests that I've known all my life, and there's a little trail that I've been using to jog on. It goes up this hill through the forest, and as I'm jogging up the trail, I hear some noise off to my left, so I stop, and just as I stop, this bear runs across the path right in front of me. It's a juvenile, probably about the size of a Saint Bernard. And it goes across in front of me, runs up a tree. At the same time, another one, the same size, a sibling, runs the other way. And I watched the one that runs the other way, and it goes right over to its mother, who's over here, not too far away from me. Now I get this baby bear with juvenile with its mother. The mother's on her hind legs, which is not a good sign. The baby's up in the tree. I'm between the mother and the baby now, essentially. And it's like, oh, like, and it happened. I didn't do it. And like, what do you do? Well, I follow my heart. I always follow my heart in these situations. I got down on one knee on the trail. I just went down on one knee, and I started talking. I said to the mother, I didn't do this, like, and I'm talking to the baby, like, why are you up there? Like, come on, you don't have to be there. Why did you do this? And I'm talking to the mother. I'm down there. I'm looking very unthreatening. I'm small and on the one knee, and the baby's crying now, and he's making human sounds. I couldn't believe it. I've never heard a bear make these kind of sounds before. But he's up in this tree making these sounds, and the mother's over there, like looking at me, and nothing, and I'm just down on one knee and talking. and, and finally, and afterwards, I'd wished I had my phone with me and I'd taken a picture. Probably a damn good thing I didn't, because that might have looked threatening. But when I jog, I don't usually carry the phone. Now I do. But eventually, he comes down out of the tree and runs right back in front of me again. I could practically touch him. He was probably about 4 yards from me. Runs back to mama, and I stand up and I go continue on up the trail, jogging. When I get to the top, I stop and I listen, and I can still hear this baby down there complaining to his mother, like, why didn't you do something? That man was scary. And you just hear it down there whining away. Anyway, it was a very nice experience, really. And it's one of those things where I hear you're supposed to make lots of noise, make yourself huge and big. And I don't always heard those things too, of course. But my reaction, my intuition, which I follow, said go down on one knee, and which made a lot of sense. I was prepared that if she came toward me, I would make a lot of noise and then run like hell down the trail. I know that bears don't particularly like to run downhill because their front legs are a little shorter than theirs, but they can and they will. And if one's after you, there's not a hell of a lot you can do. So thank God the breaking the knee worked.
Wow. Yeah, that is totally counterintuitive to what we're taught to do. I've never been
Well, no, it was intuitive. It was totally intuitive. It was counter rational,
counter
right,
rational, I guess.
right, right.
Yes,
Yeah,
you're right. It was very intuitive that you tuned into the situation and just you just knew to get small and to not be
yep,
threatening.
yeah.
That is so beautiful.
And to talk to them, to talk to them. I think the human voice, I have 2 cats, and they both look like small jaguars, incidentally. They're tabbies, and one of them, the female, is her name is Jaggy. When I was raised with cats and dogs, and, when we talk to them and the voice we use and the way we talk is extremely important, and they talk back, especially Jaggy is incredibly talkative, and she's the female. She has this, she and he, the male, he goes, so it's so hilarious how different they are, but there's a language there, and you can learn their language, up to a point, but it's very intuitive,
Yeah.
that process.
But these encounters with wildlife are really so precious. They
Yeah,
really reach a part of ourselves that it doesn't get touched very often.
yeah. A couple of years ago, they published the book Touching the Jaguar, and in fact, the week it came, it was we hit the bookstores in the United States. I was deep in the Amazon. I take groups of people to the Atwa now, who, when I was living with the Schwa, were unofficially, they were uncontacted. Now we have a beautiful lodge. It's a 15-day walk from the nearest road, and you wouldn't want to try to walk it. Very deep, but a beautiful place. And the Atwa there, and I was kayaking down a river, little river that the lodge is on. It's a tributary of the Amazon. And I come around a corner in a kayak, and I nearly hit this cat. Yeah, and it was like this beautiful adult, full-grown jaguar swimming across the river. Jaguars are water cats. They love to swim. They love to fish. And I had to back paddle not to hit her or him. Big cat. The current's taking me right into this jaguar. And the jaguar looks at me like, what the hell are you doing here? you know, I've seen a lot of people around, but I'm not seeing one riding on a log like that before. And then the jaguar climbs out of the river, climbs up the bank out of the river, shakes herself, and looks at me again and goes off into the jungle. I go on up the river a little bit where we had a nice encounter with some freshwater dolphins, the famous pink dolphins of the air. So we swim with them in that river. And then I head back in the kayak, and there's some young Achua men, some of whom I knew since before they were born, and they're waiting for me so they can help me get the kayak out of the river and up onto where it's supposed to go. And I tell them about this, and they know about the book, and so they say, okay, get in the canoe. We get in a dugout canoe, I think 3 or 4 of them and me, and we paddle back to where the jaguar left the river, and they pull the canoe up on the muddy bank of the river, and there's all these jaguar tracks, and they say, "Come on, get down, touch the jaguar tracks. Take its energy. You'll get its energy from its tracks." Your book came out, "Touch the jaguar tracks." Like, cool.
That yes, and I know you shared that with me before, but I just get such chills when you think about the the timing of all of that is just so divinely timed.
Yeah.
So touching the jaguar, is that like a regular phrase that's used in their tribe about connecting in with animal spirit in general? Or
It's really about, the shamans use it as this idea of that you don't run from that which you fear.
Okay.
And, they've been practicing it. One of the reasons that they invite me to bring people there, and they invited the Pachamama Alliance to work with them. You may have this nonprofit organization that I co-founded with Bill and Lynn Twist. And we spent a lot of time. And because they said, at some point they said that their Jaguar, what was threatening their lives and their forests were the oil companies and the mining companies. And they said, how do we touch that Jaguar? And clans and tribes that have been enemies for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, they're actually sovereign nations by law. But they came together and said, we've got to touch the Jaguar, we've got to come together and oppose the oil companies and the mining companies. And then they said, well, the real Jaguar is the dream of the world, the industrialized technological world that needs oil. The oil companies, they're a symptom. They're just a symptom of the threat. So we need to invite people from the outside world in. We need to form partnerships like the Pachamama Alliance and Dream Change in order to work on changing the dream of the world that believes that it's apart from nature. We all know that human beings are really a part of nature, and we've got to get that concept back in there. So that's that's another aspect of touching the Jaguar. So touching the Jaguar is whenever you're confronted by something that's holding you back, that's hurting you, that's causing you problems, you need to confront it. And it's often in our society, it's often something somebody's told us. You're not the right gender, you're not the right color, you're not tall enough, you're too tall, you're not short enough, you're you know you don't have enough education, whatever it is that we've been ingrained, like I was told that anything that's not food that you grow up eating in New Hampshire, any other food, you better be distrustful of it, and especially if you're eating spit, if you're drinking spit beer and eating squirming white grubs, you're gonna die. It's a concept, it's a
Wow.
perception, and it has a huge impact on reality.
Yeah, yeah, just getting back to that story from the beginning here, yeah. It's just amazing to think that the perception is what was making you so ill. It wasn't reality, just your perception.
Yeah, yeah, and that isn't to imply that I mean, that we do have physical ailments that don't come from perceptions. That certainly happens too. But even then, the way we perceive of them makes a huge, huge difference. So even when we have a sickness that is not necessarily caused by perception, the way we react to it, the way we perceive the way it is impacting our lives has a huge impact. I like to think, we all face fate or luck, if you want to call it that. What do we do with it? I could take the Vietnam War. It was a terrible inconvenience in my life. I quit school and had the job that I loved, working for the Hearst newspapers. I wasn't going to go back to college. I quit it my sophomore year. No desire to go back to college. The draft came after me. I went back to college, which I'm glad I got. And I ended up getting a business degree, which allowed me later to become an economist and write books that now I'm using to help change the corporate world. That's my job now, is to shamanize the corporate world. But also then when I got out of college, I'm faced with the draft again, so I joined the Peace Corps. And I really had no real desire to be in the Peace Corps. If I was going to be, I wanted to go to the Amazon, but it was such an incredible gift. So this terrible war that I hated, that was a really bad luck, and saw it as a really terrible fate in my life, turned out to be a gift for me. War was not a gift in any other way, but
Yeah.
it took me into this new realm. And so the way we deal with the various situations that confront us, the perceptions that we hold around that make all the difference in our lives.
Oh, so well said. One thing that I am, I guess, tipping my toe into is asking people what their earliest childhood remembrance is. And sometimes there's a connection with their life path in there. I'm just curious, do you recall
Well,
your first memory?
It's sometimes hard to distinguish with what my real memory was and what I've been told from my mother later in life or seen pictures. We had a cat named Peter, and and I had loved this cat, and he came into my parents' life. They didn't think they could have a child, and if they'd had a boy, they were going to name him Peter. But they came to the conclusion they couldn't have a child, and so they had a cat named it Peter. And then unexpectedly, I arrived, and so Peter was a couple of years old by the time I arrived, and I think Peter was not very happy with my arrival, I'm sure. But I found Peter fascinating, and I spent a lot of time crawling around for, yeah, I think till I was 2 or 3 years old, trying to be a cat. And I'd be crawling around. I'd try to jump up on the chair, and I get. And so my relationship with cats started with Peter. And as I recall, Peter was very tolerant of me. One time at this cottage in the summer, when I was maybe 10, I saw a bat fly into the cottage at dusk. I had her fishing net, and everybody's running around trying to find this bat that we know is in the house. We can't find the bat. And later we give up, and I go to bed, and I slide under the covers, and my feet touch something soft.
Oh.
It's a dead bat.
Oh.
Peter caught it, and it deposited in my bed, and I'm like, well, it's an insult. My parents worked very hard to convince me that Peter had brought me a gift.
Oh, wow.
I was never too sure whether it was a gift or a warning or what it was, but it was definitely a communication on Peter's part with me.
Wow. I just kind of see that as really amazing how you're describing mimicking the cat. I, obviously can't help but think of the connection with the Jaguar. You're learning to,
Exactly.
you know, really feel that Jaguar spirit within you.
Yes.
Wow.
And I've always had a relationship with cats. If I go to a house where there's a cat, people say, "Oh, that cat won't come to anybody. The cat's very, very aloof. This one, the cat will come to me." You're sending out a vibe, and I do talk to them too. But yeah, I
Absolutely.
love animals. I love
Absolutely.
dogs also.
It's your physical, like, getting down so you're not, yeah, you're making yourself
Yeah,
small and much more approachable, but it, like you said, it's your energy. And I am sure
yeah,
that bear felt the energy around you as being nurturing and supportive
yeah.
and, of course, subordinate.
One of my books is shapeshifting, and that's part of shapeshifting is sending out an energy.
Well, John, it's been so fabulous hearing about some of your amazing stories in nature. Do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share?
Ain't life great? You know? I mean, it's truly, I think, we didn't talk much about this, but today, what I'm devoting shamanism to, and the idea of touching the Jaguar and changing perception is the business world, and how we've got to move from a perception of maximizing short-term profits, regardless of the social and environmental cost, to creating a life economy that looks to the long term. And that's what I do now, is work with corporations and other institutions. And I realized that, we're at this remarkable time in human history where we're really on the cusp of evolving into something different than we've ever been before. And it's a consciousness change, it's a perceptual change, we said. And that's how we change reality. And we're right in it, and we've been doing things like solar and wind power and many other things, and this huge interest in shamanism that has only been around since sometime in the 90s. Before that, nobody cared, and the shamans weren't willing to share their knowledge. They are now. And we're at this incredible time that's been prophesized by all the major indigenous cultures, all the major cultures of the world. And I think we should all feel very, very blessed to be alive at this time. It's a time of crises and challenges. It's a time of tremendous opportunity where we have the opportunity as human beings to redefine what it means to be human beings, being human on this planet. And I think all your listeners should feel very, very grateful, as I do, that we're alive right now, experiencing this, and we can all play a role in shape shifting to a world that future generations will will thank us for.
Oh, I totally agree 100%. And I love thinking about it through the concept of shapeshifting. Many call it the great shift, the great turning. We are definitely evolving into a place that we never have been before in humanity. And I am so very grateful for your work and the work of the shamans of this world. I thank you so much for spending your time with me today. And I would invite everybody who's listening here to comment, to share. I would love to hear your thoughts about this topic. So have a wonderful day. And John, thank you again. And
You're
namaste.
welcome. Yeah,
Yes.
you're welcome, Maureen. My pleasure.
Thank
Please,
you.
thank you for what you're doing and keep up your great
Oh,
work.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for being a part of the Enchanted Earth podcast. Comment below, share, and most of all, please hit the subscribe button so that you'll hear when we publish another inspiring episode. You can visit us at luminous-spaces.com for more information on our online courses, retreats, and offerings. Thank you and have a magical day.